Was 12 yesterday?
No, I think
it was.
Oh, yeah, it was because you said 11. It was
Yeah,
12,
13, yeah. I was too busy worried about what episode it was, and I just butchered what it's called. I'll go again. Hello, everyone. The reason we're laughing here is I butchered the first opening. But welcome to episode 13 of the Chasing Goals podcast. We're here with Amit. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Mates for years, and we call him Amit, but we only just recently learned it was Amit. How are we doing?
Yeah, very good. It's only been about 20 years, but
It's good to have you on. We've been talking about getting you on for a while, and it's good to have someone in studio. Do you want to maybe give the viewers a bit of a rundown of kind of what you do, your background in like fitness and your business as well?
Sure. I'm just a personal trainer and strength and conditioning coach. Been doing it for almost 10 years now. Background in recent times has mostly been with, I worked for a team called Absolute MMA for quite some time. Prior to that, I was running my own business called Relentless Fitness, and now I run Relentless Collective. So in that time I kind of specialized in for a while, training combat sports athletes. So with a focus in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. So yeah, it was really in that kind of world of like training people for competitive grappling and professional grappling. And then since in the last 2 years, I've transitioned back to general pop and also training grapplers and athletes as well.
Yeah, awesome. You've done quite a lot. What was the kind of, I guess, we'll touch on a lot of stuff, but what was the big difference you saw from going from Gen Pop when you first started into to athletes and the jiu-jitsu and all that sort of stuff? What was the biggest difference you saw?
Well, when I first got into everything, like PTing and everything, my goal was to be in athletic strength and conditioning.
Yeah.
So I kind of always worked towards that spectrum.
Yeah.
And I found that once I was in that world, it really broadened my understanding of like injury prevention, rehabilitation, and working within a unit.
Yeah.
So having an understanding of what skills coaches are doing, having an understanding of what the rehabilitation side of an athlete is. So if they're seeing a physiotherapist or my therapist or whoever it may be, getting into contact with them and then making sure that we have a line of communication. So where I understand more so that I understand what they're doing and how I can help. And just a better understanding of scope of practice. So like I've always had that scope of practice mindset.
Yeah.
Understanding that I'm not an injury specialist by any means, but I can use all of these experts around me to gain more information and understanding around people's bodies.
Yeah, for sure. I guess it goes from you kind of being everything to that, I guess the Gen Pop, you're kind of, you're helping them out with training. You might give them a bit of advice on nutrition or whatever, sleep and all this sort of stuff. But then you go into a athlete who has a lot of different things. I guess it could be a bit tricky to kind of, navigate through that. But was obviously there's different mindsets in obviously athletes and Gen Pop. What was kind of what did you see there from obviously Gen Pop? They're probably there to motivate, whereas an athlete's probably already fully motivated. So what was the difference there?
A huge one was that, by the time I'd gotten to, prior to joining Absolute MMA, I was already working with a lot of athletes that trained there, which was a big reason why I eventually joined up. So I kind of found that when I had athletes approaching me to train, they already kind of knew what I did. So they were already all in, and they were just ready to like, you tell me what to do and I'll do it type of mentality.
Yeah.
And I personally just like to explain a lot, so people have an understanding of exactly what they're doing and why they're doing it.
Yeah.
So they're never lost, and it's never just like I'm some magician doing something. You know what I mean? Like they have an understanding that like all of this is like, if I can't justify myself, then I shouldn't. I shouldn't be training you essentially. So that was a huge difference early on, was that like people were coming to me and they were just ready to do everything that I said. But nowadays as well, when I have Gen Pop come in, that tends to be more how it is. Like people are just ready to do whatever it is that I kind of say.
And then I guess, how did you what's your kind of thing on when you're getting a new client or someone who's kind of fresh to the gym, how do you kind of get that retention of them? One, you obviously want to keep the client, but two, you want them to be like, enjoying the gym and going from someone who hasn't done anything to wanting to come 2-3 times a week and just improve their life.
Well, so like a big thing for me is explaining to individuals that like realistically, if you're doing strength training, in 3 to 4 weeks, you're going to see a change. Physiologically, you're going to see a change. You can do the wrong thing for 3 weeks. You're going to see a change by the 4th week, right?
Yeah.
So, and having them understand that it's not,
going?
like it's not magic. Like that's just the way muscles work.
Yeah.
And like in 4 weeks, you'll see a change.
Yeah.
So I let them know that, right? And I say, observe yourself, take your progress pictures. I obviously note down all of the weights that they're lifting. So I'm like, you can look at all the data there and see how things change, see how you feel and all that kind of stuff. I forgot the question.
The question was, how do you kind of get that retention? Because obviously people, I feel like, who come to the gym, especially when I was doing it, the first, I guess, 3 or 4 weeks was easy. Not easy, like, because they've got that motivation. Yeah. But once the motivation kind of slips, it kind of turns to consistency and just wanting to be there. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, so with Relentless Collective right now, my model is very different where I charge a weekly rate. They come in 3 times a week. Yeah. And when they're in, there's going to be at least 2 or 3 other people in at that time. Yeah. So it's created a community where people just want to come in, they see their mates, they train, they all train hard together. And funnily enough too, like it's not even like they chat all that much because they're like focused on their training. Yeah. But it gives them that extra motivation. So I found that it's very rare that I've had individuals come in and then kind of like not enjoy it after 4 or 5 weeks. Yeah. And if they do, then I'm like, it just might not be the training environment. Yeah, yeah. Like you got to find the type of training that you enjoy, especially if you're not doing this for any athletic purpose and you're just doing it to move around and get healthy and all that. There are so many different things you could be doing. Find something that's a useful use of your time that you actually enjoy doing. So you're not wasting 3 hours of your life a week.
I was talking to someone about that the other week or whatever it was. It was if you're not enjoying the training that you're doing, you're not going to keep doing it. Eventually, you're going to stop. So if you can find something that you like, it'll be it'll benefit you more long term because you want to be training. It's not a 6-month thing. It's a forever thing. You want to be training forever. So if you want to find stuff that you like and you enjoy, obviously you're probably going to change things up. But yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah. And then I guess when the clients come. Because there's probably a lot of PTs listening and strength coaches and that sort of stuff. Are you giving them screening? Like how do you kind of analyze those first few weeks of? Is it straight into we're lifting weights, deadlifts, bench press? Are we like screening them when they get there? How does it all kind of work?
So for like lots of questions to start off with, like injury history, activity history, all of that kind of stuff. Yeah. Then I generally have just like a few. Real basic, like bird dogs and like Stuart McGill type.
This is the sort of stuff. I knew all this stuff was coming, so I've got the Google ready to go. What are we talking?
Dr. Stuart McGill.
Dr. Stuart McGill. Keep going. Yeah, I knew we'd be getting into some good stuff here. So I've got the.
So I just it has a few exercises managing back pain and basically utilizing your core without compressing the spine or anything like that, which are really good basic exercises. Wakes people's coordination up as well a little bit. So I just do a few different movements where I'm just watching the way they move and gaining an understanding of what we need to work around based off of that. Then I tend to just go over real basic patterns, like I'll go over a squat, and it'll generally be a body weight squat, then. Okay, what do we have to work on here? Where are they shifting? What are they feeling? And then basing everything off of that. When people come in, if they haven't really been training, right now especially, starting off on this new business, I had a lot of older people coming in who hadn't trained. Yeah. So it was a lot more of like, okay, I need to go over a few coordination things. And I want to go over real basic patterns to see what they're capable of and then kind of understand. So I always view the first week of their training, which first week for me is 3 sessions.
Yep.
I might not even have their full program written that first week.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm just understanding what they're capable of doing. And then by the second week, they'll have a program set up. That's just the way I like to do things. I do understand that like a lot of other people like to screen and like do a full, mobility test and range of motion test and all that kind of stuff. But that's just not something that I don't think that's my strength. So I don't do it.
Well, I think once you kind of, if you're watching them, how they move, that sort of stuff, you can probably see you might be like, oh, they can, their squat pattern is like really good, but they might hinge wrong or whatever it is. Their push up or their bench press might be a bit out of whack, or they might move the bar in a wrong path or something. Yeah. Whereas I guess when you're seeing different movements and coordination, you'll be able to tell pretty quick if they need more work on going like over the basics, or if they're like pretty coordinated and they can get kind of straight into things. Yeah,
well, I tend to avoid a barbell for a while.
Yeah.
They will work. They will hold a kettlebell and a dumbbell and stuff like that. So they might do push-ups or they might do a lying dumbbell press. I just find that dumbbells are better to get an understanding of how both sides of the body are moving.
Yeah.
They can get a better range of motion there. And then later on the track, they might use a barbell. But for me, it's always like, the question is like, why?
Yeah.
Some people, like I've had people come in and they're like, I want to do barbell with, I want to do bench press with a barbell. They're not powerlifters. They're not doing anything. They're not, they're just like, just a Gen Pop person, but they want to be able to do that exercise. So I'm like, yeah, cool. I'll put you under a bar. We can do bench press. Yeah. But I tend to move more towards dumbbells just for the range of motion.
Yeah,
you get a deeper range of motion, and that's kind of what I fixate on.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. And then I guess moving back to the athletes, what was kind of obviously jiu-jitsu, it's a pretty intense kind of sport. They've obviously got to be super flexible, mobile. Yeah. So how do you kind of train someone for that? And then like leading into comps and stuff, how are you training them for that?
Well, okay, so here's the big, and this is just my opinion, but I find that I've gained this opinion from listening to other strength and conditioning coaches and sports scientists, right? Yep. So I stick within my lane, right? So first things that I always think of, like if we're looking at the pie chart of what we want, we're looking at injury prevention. Yep. If they have injuries, obviously rehabilitation, working within the structures that they have to help. So if they have a physio, and then speaking to that physio and finding out what their opinion is as well on what movements I should be focusing on, what planes of movements I should be focusing on. But I stick to real basic lifting. I don't think, from my perspective, especially with a grappling athlete, grappling is so skills intensive and they train a lot. I need to just make sure they're protected for that training.
Yeah.
I need to make sure that if they're in a position that was previously a deficit, that they have strength in that position. So I focus a lot on squatting and being able to increase their range of motion in a squat. And in my opinion, the best way to do that is to squat. Yeah. Squat, you hold the bottom position, and then over time, that bottom position increases, right? So the lower you're able to get with control and the lowest point you're able to still produce power from means that when you are grappling, if you are seated deeply into a squatted position, you still have full control over your hips, your knees, your body. So with using grappling as the main one, people are trying to knock you off their feet. They're trying to prop you off in a balance. They're pushing, pulling. If you're able to just shift your weight in your hips, then you've got a really strong base, which means that your ability to move is going to increase. So you'll produce better results when you're actively trying to do things. But also from an injury perspective, if you have a greater deal of range of motion and strength and control around a joint, you're less likely to tear or hurt yourself in that position.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's, I guess, getting, obviously stretching, that sort of thing works, and that's something, but getting strength in those areas that when you're like out of position is kind of probably what, like, let's say in a deep, like when you're in a deep squat, getting strength at the end range of what you can is kind of what will, when you come back, you might have, then you've got that range, and then we go for that little bit extra. And then is that kind of how you think about it?
I look at it is, like I'll work squats with an individual. I tend to work more front loaded than backloaded unless they're working with a safety squat bar or a transformer bar or something like that.
That's what I'm talking about. Transformer bar. It's coming up.
Yeah, I tend to work more front-loaded squats so they can keep their body upright more, and we can eliminate a lot of excessive hip hinging. Because a lot of, especially when individuals train by themselves and they've come to me, they tend to do kind of like a low bar squat, very powerlifting based, where it's just lots of hip hinge and they're not getting a lot of knee flexion in there.
Yeah, okay.
They're not really getting much depth in there.
Yeah.
So they're able to move this huge amount of weight, but it's not actually helping them in their given sport.
Yeah.
So I tend to look more. A big thing that I've always looked at is when I first started, I looked a lot at Olympic wrestling teams, and then I would follow a lot of the coaches, a lot of strength and conditioning coaches that would coach those teams and see what they were doing. I also looked at sports that I found would probably work well within the jiu-jitsu frame. So I looked from a perspective of strength and range of motion, like gymnastics, calisthenics, stuff like that, and then Olympic weightlifting, the range of motion that they're able to get through the hips and knees and things of that nature. So if I looked at Olympic weightlifter and looked at what they were doing to produce squats that gave them that type of range of motion with the strength that they have, because they were able to move quite substantial amounts of weight, I would then just use that. So what I found is that if, there's research to back it up. A lot of the ideas that I have aren't my ideas; they're ideas of like sports scientists and stuff.
Yeah.
That I've just like read over the years. But essentially, if you're in a squatted position with control, so no excessive rounding of the spine or anything like that, if you're in that position, you're at the point of deepest stretch for all of your muscles within your legs and your glutes. So if you hold that position under excessive resistance, so additional weight of your body weight, you're pretty much at the deepest stretch that you'll be able to get with that muscle with resistance, right? So over time, you will increase your range of motion in that movement, right? The only thing that would impede in that is your joints. So if you're not able to, if your joint doesn't move that way and you're just kind of at that depth, then you'll be at that depth. It's fine. I wouldn't push anyone beyond anything that's excessive. So I'm huge on like everything needs to be like within reason. I'm not going to make people do things that their body isn't shaped to do. But essentially, like I do get people to kind of hold that lengthened position in the squat where they're at the bottom, all the muscles are stretched out, hold that position for 1 to 2 seconds and then blast up from there. Because you're going to increase your range of motion. You're going to learn how to gain strength in a deficit position, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. And this is the transformer bar that I'm looking at. So it's a safety squat bar with a, and you can move, you move where the weight plates go by the looks of it?
Yeah, so you can basically change the center of gravity. So you can mimic a goblet squat and a front squat, a high bar back squat, a low bar back squat, all based on how that weight's sitting in relation to yourself. And then it also has movable sleeve positions. So Kabuki Strength designed and innovated that bar. And then in Australia, there's a company called Carbon to Diamond that have modified that bar and created the multiverse bar. It's a carbon to number 2, not the word. So they just came out with a bar called the Multiverse Bar.
Which is kind of a similar type.
So they have a new version coming out, and basically it's bigger. One of the big things is that it's bigger and a lot stronger than the original Transformer bar. But there are also lots of differences that they've made in there. But it's a great bar. I got to meet those guys, and I purchased one of the Multiverse bars. And it's been a brilliant addition to the old home gym.
Yeah, for
especially
sure.
being from when you're from Australia. Like if you were to try and get a Transformer bar, it's not impossible, but it's going to cost you over $1,000 just to get it in. After all the you have to wait for them to produce it, and then obviously the shipping times and all that kind of stuff. But Kabuki Strength are great.
For sure.
I would follow, if you don't already follow Chris Duffin and Kabuki Strength, then you should definitely get on board.
This would be, I guess, it'd be perfect. Definitely for obviously people that have tight upper body and they struggle to get their hands all the way back on the bars and that sort of thing. But then just the ease which you could overload or like change just a little bit. If you change a little bit of stress on the muscle, just a little, like shift it back just a little bit.
Yeah.
It's just something a little bit different that your body has to deal with where, it might just make, when you're ever stagnant, it just might make it a bit easier to kind of progress from that sort of thing rather than, just having the same bar and that sort of thing. That's
And if you're trying to do stuff like, if you're someone that likes doing good mornings or split squat or something like that, it allows you to load up on those exercises in a pretty easy way. Like,
a bit of more safer type. Yeah.
And you can load up more. Like, if you really like split squatting, if you're obsessed with split squatting, you can load up quite a bit if you want. So it just gives you options. Dr. Pat Davidson has a few little things that he does with it too, where he basically uses it back to front. So it's pulling the body upright in a squat. Just real interesting stuff. There's lots you can do with it. It's an interesting piece of equipment. I like looking at different pieces of equipment and seeing what the results are and whatnot.
Well, it's always like that's what fitness and especially strength training, that sort of stuff. No one kind of knows how far we can take things. Like we've got what we know at the moment, but people are always innovating and things are always people are learning more things and different things are coming out that it's just going to progress and get better and better. And
if you're a trainer or a coach and your ideas aren't changing based on the research that's coming out and the ideas that are being presented to you, then like you're doing something. In my opinion, you're doing something wrong. Like there are some amazing researchers out there pulling out some great information.
It's definitely one of those things where you can get. I remember when I was a bit younger, I was 18, 19, or probably maybe a little bit after. I was like, I'm pretty sure I know what I'm doing. Yeah. And then you look back on that and you're like, oh, you did not know one thing. And even about 4 or 5 years ago, I was pretty kind of stuck on what I was doing. I was like, this is what I'll do forever type thing. But then it's just not. That's just not what happens.
It's not. And there's always I always say there's no one right way to do things. There are multiple right ways. It's all the why. The main question is why.
Yeah.
So there are hundreds of different methods that, not hundreds, but there are a lot of different methods. That I know.
Oh, okay.
Is what I meant.
Thousands.
There are a lot of different methods that I know of that I don't implement because, one, I don't think I have the skills to implement them.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that would be a waste of my time until I attain those skills. And two, I don't think they're justified. I can't personally justify them with my clientele or my programming to use them.
Yeah.
So it's not that you have to, in my opinion, you should be absorbing all of this information, understanding what the results are and why they are what they are, and then deciding whether they fit into what you're programming and how you want to use them.
I think that's what it. The first thing that, especially when I'm training myself or people, what do I want to achieve? Do I want to, if I'm, do I want to lift a heavy deadlift, or do I want to be able to jump and touch a basketball ring, or do I want to be able to do I want to be able to run a marathon, or what's your goal? I feel like what is your goal? And then you bring it back to how am I going to reach that goal through my training? Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. That's how it should be.
Yeah.
You should I always you use that kind of pie chart idea of create a mental pie chart, put in all the things that you want, and then decide what is more important to you.
Yeah.
And that's how you should base your programming, your exercise selection, all of that from.
Yeah, for
is
sure.
Understanding what you're trying to accomplish with what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's why personally, when I was moving back to grappling for a second, when I was training a lot of guys there, they didn't have a great deal of time to spend on strength training until, in my opinion, until they reached a certain point, because they would reach their goals with weightlifting and then they would see those results when they were training.
Yeah.
And that's when they were like, okay, I can put a little bit more energy into this because I can see what those results are.
Yeah.
But early on, it's not like we were doing a lot of power and crazy explosive movements or anything like that.
Yeah.
It was it's all very basic strength training stuff. It's all about how do we manage volume and intensity around all of the other training that you're doing. So we're not going crazy, and they're not doing they're not lifting to failure, because it's stupid for them to be grappling really hard, which is grappling. I find that grappling is one of those sports where you kind of have to do it in order to understand what the actual needs and requirements of the sport are.
Yeah.
Because there are so many minute details of like, there's a concept of like, there's a huge concept of pressure in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and grappling, of creating pressure when you're trying to pass guard and in positions like side control, right? Basically, you're trying to make your opponent uncomfortable in those positions. And all of it is based on like really, from my understanding, a lot of it is based from like minor movement. So if you're able to, if you have someone wrapped like this and you're able to squeeze your shoulder blades back, that's a very small range of movement that you've done, and you've just gotten rid of 2-3 centimeters of room there, which is huge, right? So now you can really affect the way someone's breathing by just a small movement with the shoulder blades. Yeah. And I don't think you fully appreciate that until one, that happens to you. When someone way smaller than you, you're like, fuck, I can't breathe. And this guy's like 67 kilos, right? And then when you're able to implement that, and you get an understanding that it's not really about the huge movements. It's not about being like explosive necessarily. Yeah. There are these little things that if you can get a better proprioception and understand where those movements are, you'll gain better control over individuals when you're actually moving.
Yeah, and I guess it'd be, especially with those athletes, there's no point, like, I went and just did a boxing class last night, and we did so many push-ups, and I haven't done a push-up for so long, and I was like, I know I'm not going to be able to move my arms for about 5 days. Like, and I was just doing them, and every one was to fail. I'm like, this is in my head. I was like, this is so dumb. But it was a group class, so you get carried away. And but imagine, back to what you were saying. The reason I said is, imagine, like me feeling like I am now. Like I'm not doing upper body for another 4 days. Yeah. Like an athlete can't do that. Yeah. They can't be just absolutely bury themselves. Whereas in the next day, they're just like, I can't do my technique stuff because they're sore. You need that. That's when I guess for that kind of level of athlete, it'd be tough. You want to obviously build, strength and this and that sort of stuff. But then they might be training 3 other times during that day.
Yeah, that's it. I mean? Yeah. So I find that if I'm training with an athlete, one, I need to understand what their schedule is, what their ideal schedule is, and what their realistic schedule is, and then find out where I slot into that. Yeah. Okay. And I also find that there's like that first 6 weeks is going to be me gaining their trust, right? Because especially in grappling, and I like a mentality that I found with a lot of individuals was that, like, at first they were a bit like distrustful, like I was trying to stop them from grappling so they could lift weights, or that like I thought that strength training was the most important thing and they couldn't learn anything. Like they have this, and not so much now, I don't think, but back then big time was like it's one or the other. And if you're only doing one, then you should never do the other. And if you become strong and you try to do jiu-jitsu, you're only going to rely on your strength. And it was such a silly... it was a mentality that I didn't understand. So I'm like, oh, if you have that strength, right, you're not going to not rely on your technique. Yeah. You just have strength to back up that technique. You know? But it takes that 6 weeks, I think, for them to understand that, like, no, I understand what you're doing and I'm trying to help you to make the most of all your time. I always just think, like, if you have an hour in the gym, what can I do to make sure that you make the most of that time? Because you're putting time and energy into this. Yeah. You're using the only resource that, isn't renewable to you, which is your time. Yeah. Right. So that's, to me, the biggest thing. Right. So how can we maximize that? And it doesn't matter if you're an athlete or an office worker. How can I maximize that time for you? So you're putting all that energy in. It's not just getting wasted on stupid exercises or circuits that aren't going to help you achieve your goals. Yeah. No, that was awesome. I was just coming back. So with something like that, let's say obviously grappling, they need a lot of, like, I guess, is it wrist and hand strength and all that sort of stuff. Because they're already doing so much of that, would you then train that as well, or would you and because it would have transfer, or do you think they're doing so much of it that they're already training it? Well, so for a lot of individuals, right, there are two different types of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specifically, but mostly submission grappling as well. There's gi and no gi. So gi is when they're wearing the costume, right? Oh, sorry. Yeah, the karate looking outfit, right? So if you're doing gi jiu-jitsu, it is a lot based. So you can utilize your opponent's clothing to execute techniques and submit them, right? So it requires a lot of grip. They tend to work their grips quite a lot. Yeah. So there... Yes, I do make them do a lot of extra grip training within reason, right? Yeah. So, like, obviously, we want to make sure that, like, they don't get burnt out or get inflammation in their joints and all that. But a lot of the time, you're looking at individuals that might be working one pattern a lot, and they're not working every other pattern they have. So they might have weak as pierced wrists, which is a huge. I mean, jiu-jitsu, like a lot of people, wrist locks are a big thing, right? They're considered like a cheap technique, right?
What's a wrist lock when you grab someone's wrist?
Oh yeah, you can submit someone with just a small like movement of the wrist, right? So they're considered like a cheap technique because it's like some people consider them to be like not very technical, but this technique involves everything. People just like people are just pathetic and they don't like being tapped out. So, but the big thing is that like some people would tap out to a wrist lock that. The reason they were tapping out is because you have really shit wrists. Like you have real bad wrist mobility.
Yeah.
You have really bad wrist strength. And now like I put your wrist here and you're freaking out because your wrist doesn't bend that way. In reality,
I hurt myself. I was like, oh.
like in reality, you should have pretty good wrist mobility. Right? So I looked at the concept of straight arm strength in gymnastics and calisthenics. I found a few routines to increase your wrist strength and your wrist mobility. I looked a lot into, like, I love strongman and all that kind of stuff. So, and I have a client that you're well acquainted with, Dane, who also is a big, like, strength nerd. So, and I've been training him since I started coaching, right? So he loves, like, sending me books and all that kind of stuff. So he once bought me this, like, old circus strongman, like, group training book. And it was really, really interesting. But, Charles Poliquin also has like lots of information on grip training and like working different grip patterns and how you can program for different grip patterns. So what they essentially find is that if you work a different grip pattern per day, you won't overly exhaust those muscles, so you can avoid inflammation and things of that nature. Okay. So some people might only work contraction of the wrist, right? But they're not really working their extensors. They're only working their flexors in the wrist. So we now need to look at extensors. So, whether that be just like the extensor bands over the fingers, whether that be dumbbell raises, whatever it may be, right? Then some people just like, they're actually not really doing a lot of grip training anyway. You know what I mean? They're holding for life onto people, but like they're not doing any additional work. Yeah. So I have a wall of Captains of Crush at my gym, and we use them. You know what I mean? What is it? Captains of Crush, the Iron Mind grippers.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I thought you said Captain Crunch. Oh, no. Is that just the ones where you squeeze like that?
Yeah. So I have from the guide to 3 at my gym with all the 0.5s and all of that kind of. So we can work grip. I have like a Rolling Thunder type implement. I have lots of I just love grip training. I'm also a big strength training nerd, so I just I buy things.
It doesn't sound like it.
I have a big collection of equipment, but so we utilize it all because one big thing I found just anecdotally from going to jiu-jitsu competitions, because basically in order to get into the world of it, I made the decision that I should have an understanding of what the sports require. So I started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu before I'd done my PTing course and all that, just so I could get immersed in it and have a better understanding. And one thing I found is that I would go to these Jiu-Jitsu competitions and guys their grips would burn out. And, sometimes it would be like adrenaline dump or whatever. But, their grips would just be burnt out. So I was like, well, if we can increase their grip strength and they're not overly relying on these things, and basically their base level strength increases, then they're not to hold someone won't actually require that much effort, and it'll be fine. Yeah. So I did that with a lot of guys, and it made a huge difference straight away. Yeah, that's cool. So I worked a lot of grip training. I still do work a lot of grip training, and I think it's huge. I also think that so I'm a big proponent on using straps when you deadlift. And using implements to help you, right? If we're deadlifting for you to gain strength in your hip extension and your glutes and your hamstrings, then if the thing that's limiting you is your grips, then
what's the point?
I use those straps, and my rule is that if you use an implement to assist you, if you're going to use straps, if you're using a lifting belt, then you need to work the muscles that are either being braced. So in the case of a lifting belt, you have to make sure that you're utilizing your obliques, your transverse abdominis, and your rectus abdominis in your programming. If you're using lifting straps, you have to make sure that you're doing grip work, right?
That makes
So
sense. That's a good little philosophy to have, to be
well,
honest.
yeah, I always viewed it as like I use lifting straps when I deadlift, but if I don't have my lifting straps, I can lift the weight that I'm deadlifting. It's just that I want to save my forearms for other things,
Yeah, and I thought that was a good point. Like, if the limiting factor to a deadlift's you're dropping the barbell, not because you can't lift it, it's because your wrist can't. That's not the point of a deadlift.
Yeah,
if
you're I say everything, like, you have to understand what you're trying to work towards. If you're a powerlifter, obviously, like, this isn't going to apply to you, right? But I'm huge on strongman training, and so that's kind of the thing. They have a deadlift event and then they have a grip event. And so, like, they're not going to burn their grips on a deadlift because it inhibits their grip event. It's not that they can't hold the weight on the deadlift. They most likely can. Yeah. But so I think that's, like, the mentality to take away from it is, like, decide what it is that you're wanting to do. Yeah. And if the reason that you're not using straps is your ego because you think that, like, it cheapens the lift, then grow the fuck up. Like, in my opinion, you know what I mean? Like, for
sure.
What are you doing? Like, you're just wasting your energy. Like, it doesn't make sense to me.
Nah, for sure. And especially maybe, can we touch on are you talking about the belt and how, like, because I feel like a lot of people don't use a belt correctly.
Yeah.
How would you kind of describe to someone who hasn't used a belt before? Yeah. Do we just chuck it on and just rip it as tight as I've ever had it? And just chuck it on and then go and deadlift? Is that kind of the best way to do it?
Well, so first you have to understand, in my opinion, you have to understand what you're trying to accomplish with bracing, right? So when we're bracing, I always explain it as we're trying to create force on all sides. Yep. I always use like a knee brace or a knee sleeve as like the example. No doubt people have seen people wrap their ankles in footy and all that kind of stuff. So they have an understanding it. So I tell them, like, think about what that is doing. It's creating force from all sides. So ideally, our muscles are doing that. Yep. Lower back, obliques, transverse and rectus abdominis are creating bracing there for our spine.
Yeah.
Now, all the belt is doing is reinforcing that. It's creating that as an outside force, and then you are bracing against that belt. So, in my view, people have to train to use a belt. So like instead of them reaching a point and then going, okay, now you've hit this weight, and now grab the belt and chuck it on, and you'll be sweet. To me, that's like a real dumb idea. Is like you should like start light with the belt and train your use of a belt. Understand how to brace against the belt, what that even means, how to breathe with the belt, how tight the belt needs to be, and the belt positioning for you. It'll be different for other individuals. I've seen people that wear it and it's like near their sternum. I've seen people wear it and it's closer to their belly button. Whatever it may be, like it's that's everyone's physiology is different. So you have to find that. But once you have an understanding of what you're trying to accomplish with it, then you use it with a lighter weight, so you understand how it's going to help you. You'll be able to implement it later down. I don't know if that answered the question.
No, it did. It was good. I was just thinking like why, and another reason why it's important to train those muscles that you're going to use so you can, because I feel like if you tell someone to, like tense their glute, who's never done any glute work, they probably won't be able to do it.
Yeah, definitely.
But so if you're going to use a belt, you need to train all those muscles so you can, when you're breathing and when you're feeling that air come down, you can kind of push it all out rather than, because I feel like a lot of people will be able to push their stomach out.
Yeah.
But then,
not to the sides.
The rear side and that would make, I feel like a lot of people would find that a bit more tricky. So it makes sense.
Well, I often go over diaphragmatic breathing, especially like early days of my coaching. I used to focus on diaphragmatic breathing a lot. I still do. It's just that I used to really harp on diaphragmatic breathing.
That was your thing.
I used to make people. I just make people have an understanding of what diaphragmatic breathing is.
Yeah.
Put their hands on the stomach, so they have understanding of pushing their stomach out, pushing their stomach to their side, so they can understand what their obliques are, what their abdominals are. Nowadays too, like Stuart McGill, I use the McGill curl up a lot. I think that's just a killer exercise.
Well, I'll get this on the tube.
Yeah,
this will be perfect. Stuart McGill.
Yeah. So sorry.
Is he a leg spinner?
That's been brought up quite a few times. I'm like, after he finished his cricket career,
that'll be him. Stuart McGill. And then what was the curl up?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that him there? That's him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically you just have one knee up with the foot planted on the ground, hands underneath the lumbar spine, and then you're essentially rolling and curling your shoulders up off the mat, off the floor, or whatever it may be, to contract your abdominal area.
Yeah, okay.
Right?
Well, this isn't Stewie McGill, but
there's YouTube is full of people that coach that movement way better than I have just now. So,
so here we go. This is it for anyone watching on the tube. We've got this guy. He's lying down. Okay, so he's got his hands under his back here, his lower back.
Yeah, just under the lumbar.
All right, so then what you're going to do is imagine that, the way Stuart McGill describes it, imagine that your head and your shoulders are on a scale. And all you want to do is unweight the scale until it gets to a 0, right? So we're just going to raise our sternum.
Yeah, okay.
That's all the
So he's just lifting his head off the ground. Is that it?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So we hold that position, as you said. So generally, I give someone like a timer that they can hold under their back.
Yeah.
So they hold the position, they click the timer, and they hold that contracted position.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, cool. And that's about. And he's breathed into his diaphragm. Is that right?
Yeah, he's basically essentially you're doing an ab curl, but your hands are under your back, so they're limiting how much spinal flexion or how much spinal extension happens, right?
Yeah,
so
okay.
You're basically not extending the spine. You're not going right up until the point where your spine flattens.
Yeah, I get you.
And then you're holding that position. And then, I generally start with people holding that position for 5 seconds.
Yeah.
3 reps each side, and then you increase
Build
the time
up.
that you're holding.
Yeah.
And then just like side planks, I make people do side planks, and I make sure that they're doing them like correctly. A lot of people will do them because they played footy or something like that, and they're like, shoulders are drooped over, or like, they're just doing like things that, because when they were doing footy, they were made to hold it for 2
so
minutes,
long,
which like no one does. So they're just kind of leaning on their elbow for 2 minutes, and it's just stupid. But like they do something like that so I make them do it correctly and just hold it for like 20 seconds.
Yeah.
Get an understanding of what those muscles are.
Yeah.
I make them do something like a pull-off press, like anti-rotation exercises.
Yeah.
And then like a trunk rotation later on down the line, so they understand anti-rotation and rotation and utilizing all those muscles. So I think I'm a huge proponent of of ensuring that you're working your transverse, your rectus, your obliques.
Yeah.
Through rotation and through static holding and everything. So,
well, I think it just makes sense that one, to do that, but then two, to train, like using a belt, it's a skill.
Yep.
Like anything. So to get better at that skill, you got to like train it.
Yeah.
So I feel like if anyone wants to implement a belt, and it does, I 100% agree, it helps. You can definitely lift more with the belt. Yeah. So like, if people want to implement that, just make sure, you're starting off. I'd even start off using a belt on a lightweight, so you can practice.
Definitely.
You know what I mean?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely have to start off on a lightweight, so you understand what you wouldn't teach any exercise.
Yeah, true.
With a very heavy weight or anything like that.
1 RM.
Yeah, like you have someone sitting under a bar that's like 8 RM for them to like. So yeah. Anyway, I think you have to learn. I understand what the belt is. Learn how to use it. I think I see a lot of people too that like will have watched like a gym bro walk around with like a belt on the whole workout and then just think, that's what they're doing. Yeah. So like they wear the belt real light and it's not really helping them. And so you have to it's going to be uncomfortable during the lift because you have to brace against it. And if it's too loose, you're not going to be able to do that. And so it takes a lot of education, in my opinion. Yeah, that's with anything. Like I'm huge on like, you really have to understand or you have to make your client understand what it is they're doing and why they're doing it. I always look at it like, that's why I tend to use that term coach a little bit, because unlike someone that might just be coming in and then getting trained and then leave and have no idea how to do anything, I want everyone that works with me to have a better understanding that if in 3 months they decide to leave and go train at the gym themselves, they've left with actual skills and they can actually have an understanding. I don't want anyone ever coming to me and training with me because I'm doing something that they have no idea what I'm doing and they rely on me for that. To me, that's just weak. Like,
yeah, for sure. I feel like that could be just like a if your client like depends on you to, like, if you're, you go away on a holiday and they can't train,
Yeah.
and they've been with you for a year, I don't think you've kind of done your job as
No.
a strength
Yeah.
coach or whatever it is.
I think that's like such a salesman like mentality that you get like taught when you, especially if you've done if you've done sports science, this probably won't apply. But if you've done a cert 3 and 4, you go through this bullshit sales like how to win friends, alienate people like type indoctrination where they're like, and make sure that you're making it fun and make sure they're doing things that are complicated so they can't do them themselves, so they rely on you. And I'm like, no, like I'm not going to manipulate people into coming to me. Like I want them to come to me because they understand what it is I provide, and what it is I provide isn't just manipulating them into like coming here,
Well, it just make it kind of it's just like a complete opposite to what you want as a strength coach. You want everyone, like for me, like you want people to be healthy, fit, be able to train them by themselves.
Yeah.
And if you're not giving them those tools,
Yeah.
it's like you're pulling in the opposite direction of what the industry you wanted to be a part of.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
There's this happens with this kind of idea gets brought up in jiu-jitsu conversation a lot, but it was brought up at my gym because I have a few guys that I've programmed in a few like calisthenic exercises. So we're going through the regressions, and now one of them was doing like a pike press. So I had them on parallettes doing pike press, and they were doing it better than I could do it. And we were all joking, like they were like, "Oh, student becomes a master." But I was like, "Yeah, but like ideally, like I do want you lifting heavier than me. Like if you can lift heavier than me and you can do exercises better than me, then that's awesome. If if I was a jiu-jitsu coach and my student's better than me, that's awesome. That's brilliant. Yeah. Like you should look at that like as a positive thing. Like your teaching is so good or whatever it may be. So I'm like, I don't want anyone ever coming to me because they're forced. To.
No, definitely. I think it would be good to touch, like maybe couldn't you touch on over the journey? Maybe we'll pick maybe 3 or 4 people. We've named a few already.
Yeah.
But who you've kind of or who have been the most influential in your kind of your coaching and your strength and all that sort of stuff.
Okay.
I know four's not many for you. I know you got
that's a really really hard question to answer because like there's so many people that I would even neglect in my head because like I've just forgotten or whatever it may be. Like I'm a huge like.
This
I'm
is not your top 4. We're just for anyone who he doesn't mention.
Just like just from an idea of like what I look at. Like I'm a huge fan of like coaching in general. So I watch a lot. I participate whether it was jiu-jitsu or whatever it may be. I did classes a lot with a lot of different coaches because I wanted to see what is it that they're doing, how are they communicating these ideas and how is that helping and all that kind of stuff, right? So. I had individuals from that world that I looked at because I was like, oh, that's interesting that they did this and this to teach something.
Yeah.
And that worked for 40 people that were on the mat that day. So maybe there's something in there for me to utilize in my,
for sure
realm. So I had individuals like it's still to this day, like my business partner in Relentless Collective, Oliver Smith, who's a phenomenal jiu-jitsu coach. And his ability to explain and communicate with individuals is just excellent. And we're in the same kind of idea at Relentless Collective of like this communication is key. Like we have to understand how it is that we communicate. That's Relentless Fitness, mate. That's the old business.
Wrong, that's old school. Sorry.
Yeah, but it all of this is based on how can we effectively communicate with individuals and work different styles of communication and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And he's huge. Like he's just a phenomenal teacher. Lachlan Giles, who's his current Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach, is excellent as well. Like he's such has such a analytical mind, and the ideas that he's come up with and how he's come up with those ideas is really fascinating to me. So like those are 2 guys, and then even like historically, my original Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach was Tiago Stefanuti. He had an ability to like just to to make people feel comfortable. And I thought,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
that's really, how can I work that into it? Understanding what my strengths were too. Like, I'm not a motivator. I can't yell at people and cheer them on
I'm
to
the
do
same.
anything.
That's not me.
No, it's a waste of my energy. I'm not good at it. It's artificial. So I don't do that. And I let people know if that's something that they need and want, then I'm probably not the best person to be coming to. And if you're like, I don't motivate that way.
Yeah,
So
sure.
if you're struggling to get motivation and you need it to be that way, then I'm not the person for it, type of thing. From a strength training perspective, it's not even from the coaching perspective. It's like just from someone that I really appreciate how much knowledge they share. Two individuals, Lane Norton.
Yeah.
I just think I really appreciate individuals that are posting huge amounts of information that they've researched and developed over years and years, and then just going on YouTube and then posting it all for free.
Yeah.
That's huge to me, and I really appreciate that. So whether it's his nutrition advice or his strength training advice, he has just so much information out there for free. Eugene Teo.
Well, let's touch on Lane quickly because I was I follow him on Instagram and stuff, but like he just did a powerlifting company. I'm pretty sure he won it.
Yeah.
And his numbers are crazy.
Yeah.
But also like a lot of his stuff is like evidence based, and he'll show you like what's going on. He'll call out the bullshit and that sort of stuff. So if for anyone who's new, I think he's a great person to if you like don't know where to start, because there's so much information. It's hard to weed out, especially if you're early on in your gym life. It's hard to weed out what's the good information and what's bad, because it's always coming at you, and it's everywhere.
Yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I mean? It's everywhere. Instagram, TikTok, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he Bio Lane. He's that's his biolane.com.
I think he does, like, if you're a coach and a trainer, he posts really great information it can be dense.
Yeah.
But he has great information.
Yeah, for sure.
That he's posting on YouTube.
But
Then he has like
a lot
little
of people like us. Anyone who's kind of a strength coach likes the dense stuff.
Personally, yeah, I like that. But he also has stuff that's accessible up there. Mike Israetel, he's worked with Renaissance Periodization, is brilliant. Same thing, lots of really brilliant information on YouTube, on Instagram, whatever it may be.
Yeah, he's good. I've got his book, I'm pretty sure.
He's the series that they're doing now too is like on YouTube. He's doing like a myth busting type one, I just think it's brilliant for like if you're an individual that's really interested in strength training, then that series might be a really good one to watch.
Yeah.
And even if you're not, like, one big thing that I find with a lot of these guys is like you get a glimpse of what words they use to describe things and what terms they use. So like if there's a way that someone explains something that's different to the way that you explain it, that's always good, something good to keep in the back pocket, because you're no doubt going to meet an individual and try to teach them something and they don't. And to me, the strength of like a good coach is that you explain something to someone, they don't understand it, and then your ability to change that explanation.
Yeah.
Right? Always trying to work around what helps your client rather than just reinforcing the same information over and over again. You know?
I used to do that all the time. Like, how hard is it to pull up a bar?
Yeah.
This is when I was in my younger days. I don't do that anymore. But
One thing I found that like I might have situations occur where I try to teach someone something a certain way, then I change the explanation, they still don't get it, and I might be stuck like, I don't know how else to explain this. I change the exercise, I change the movement, and then I go back and go, okay, I need to look into this more. I need to get a better understanding to understand how I can coach this differently. Pat Davidson had something interesting that he mentioned, which was like something that I think this is a lot of stuff that you find, right? Rather than having someone teach it to you, it's stuff that will just happen over years of like coaching.
Yeah.
You'll kind of get, like you'll try and teach someone a squat or a pull up or a push up or something, and they might not do it exactly the way that's like perfect.
Yeah.
Right. But they're not doing anything harmful. They're not hurting themselves. They're not doing anything. So it's okay to be like, that's good enough for today.
Yeah.
And then over time, in my opinion, there is no doubt that that individual will get more comfortable with that movement. Then you can start making those little tweaks and working on it. But if they're not doing anything to harm themselves or hurt themselves, then it's fine.
Yeah.
So Mike Israetel, he's great. Eugene Teo posts a lot of free information as well.
How do you spell that? Do you know?
EUGENE.
I would have gone nowhere near that. E-U-G-E-N-E.
No, EU.
Oh god.
And TEO. So he's just a trainer and coach from Melbourne.
Is he? Yeah, nice.
Yeah, posts lots and lots of like helpful information. Like everyone, all these guys just post free information online for all of us to use. And
Yeah, I think I've actually seen this guy before. Yeah,
like, that's just awesome. Like, thank you for posting up good quality information for free for like all coaches and trainers to use. From a jiu-jitsu perspective, there's a exercise scientist by the name of Tim Trebell, who happens to train at Absolute MMA. But if you don't follow Tim Trebell or if you aren't subbed to him on YouTube, you should be.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, I'm on
posts
YouTube.
Just amazing information. Has a very big YouTube channel based on that as well. Posts a lot of information that he gathered from doing his PhD research and all of that. Still posts a lot of information. Especially if you do grappling, follow him. If you don't do grappling, still follow him because he posts up amazing rehab and strength advice there.
Was it Tim Travail?
Yeah, that's him.
That's him.
Yeah.
Boom.
And then there's guys that I've like worked with. Someone like Seamus Hayes, who's Iron Fix on Instagram.
Yep.
He's just hugely knowledgeable individual. Awesome, lovely guy, but incredibly strong. Incredibly strong human with lots of information.
Yeah.
And he's the type of individual that will, in a heartbeat, like stop and help you out and work with things. And I think that his ability to coach certain movements, all movements in general, but like I've seen the way that he works with people working through their squat and their deadlift, and just the information that he comes just from watching him coach. I was like, fuck, that's so interesting.
Mad.
That's like, that's brilliant. So, I don't coach like him, but I've gained a lot from just witnessing him do his work,
Yeah. It's all that stacks for people to kind of have a look at and kind of look over.
I've got look. I just think that like you really have to look at. I look at weightlifting. I look at athletic strength conditioning. I looked at football strength and conditioning. I looked at wrestling strength and conditioning. I think that look at individuals who are like experts in their field. Whether it be even bodybuilding, like I'm not a bodybuilder, I'm not a fan of bodybuilding or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I watch individuals in that space to see what ideas they have and what reasoning they have for them, because there's no doubt that you can adopt things and adapt things.
Yeah.
Dan Howard, who was the head strength and conditioning coach at Absolute MMA, he's currently working in Florida. And he's just brilliant. Like, I got to work with him closely at Absolute. Okay. Lovely dude, but like just such a data rich man. Like he really, his ability to look and collate data and and base his programming around that's just brilliant. And I think
and we need those people to kind of,
it's a balance, right? Like you need to have multiple things going. That's not my strength, but I can watch him and learn from him, and then I can make it a strength for me.
Sure.
I think my strength is through just communication and coaching, but I look at all of these other guys to gain all of this other all these other advantages, and it also to me is like a good balance. You get a greater understanding of that there's that Dunning-Kruger effect. Like you said, like how I was and how you were when we first started, where you're like, I know everything. Yeah. I've just finished and I read this book and now I know everything. And then you start realizing how little you know. But when you have these other individuals who are experts in these fields, you're able to strengthen a lot of those deficits up. And you also have a greater deal of respect that this person's been doing this specific doctorate for 7 years. They're working on this thesis or this idea or whatever it may be. I can't, I haven't been doing that. So it'd be silly of me to pretend like I could do what these guys do. Yeah. But I can use the information that they've gained, and I can watch their content, and I can see the information they come out with, and it can make me a better coach, and I can implement their ideas if they're, viable for me. It's,
I saw this, I think it might have been Jordan Peterson who was talking about how people who kind of just get into something or are new will communicate this is how it's done, this is what it's done. And he goes, the people that are, this might be completely wrong, but but he goes, but the people that have been in this and are the masters of their craft will communicate well, at the moment, it looks like this is kind of how we should run all the studies at the moment are saying this. It's not, it's never, very rarely will they give you a definitive do this. Even though they know so much, they still say, there could be something else that's a possibility.
Yeah,
and it was just like the masters of their field communicate kind of like that. And it kind of
that's the Dunning-Kruger effect, right?
Yeah,
so the more knowledge an individual gains, the more they realize how much they don't know and how much there is to know. So they're more hesitant to like, jump the foot and say things in real exact tones. That's it, definitive terms. But, so yeah, that's huge. And I think that's a normal thing that like every PT and every coach, I'm sure when they first started was prone to that. Yeah. And then the more they learn, the more they realize they need to adapt. And and also the understanding that there are many different right ways. It's about what works, how you justify what it is that you're doing. Yeah. So an exercise, you might have selected an exercise that isn't the best exercise, but you're better at coaching that exercise and implementing that exercise into your programming than another exercise that you've seen another coach
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess a couple of things before we finish off, we'll throw out there. Now, I know that last topic was tough for you, but you can pick 3 people ever, dead or alive, to work out with. Who do you pick?
Oh, that's...
I knew this would be a tough one for you.
Why are you doing this to me?
It doesn't have to be 3. I can give you 5.
Look,
I can give you a handful.
More than like work. So I don't like training personally. Like I find it really hard to concentrate and focus when other individuals are around. Like I tend to get distracted really easily.
You can train them,
but I would prefer to be trained by, like learn things from, like you know. And it's not that like I agree with everything that these individuals have said, but I just think that it would be an interesting experience. Someone like Charles Poliquin would be interesting. Been around for a long time, has lots of ideas. That would be pretty crazy. From just a fanboy kind of perspective, like Brian Shaw.
I knew you were going to say Brian Shaw.
Yeah, Brian Shaw would be pretty cool. And he's an individual too that like I've watched. I think Super Training Gym once like posted up a video of him coaching a deadlift. And I find that really interesting, like what his breakdown, he has a sports science background as well. Yeah. Seeing what his breakdown of those movements are and just getting an understanding of like, just not even training, like talking with them, like getting, perspective, like Ed Cohn's another one, like, just once again, it's not even that like I would do what they're doing or whatever. It's just, I find it like really, really interesting. Dmitry Klokov, like that would be a pretty cool one.
Who's that?
He is a weightlifter
no disrespect
for Russia.
Dimitri. I reckon I know who he is. Yeah. Did he pull like he did a 200 kilo snatch or something? Is that what?
Yeah. That's not even
snatch, 200 kilos.
That's not even one of his records, I don't think. But anyway, he's just a freak of nature. Yeah. And that would just be cool.
Well, they reckon the Russians they've had some good training philosophies over the like they've been very good in what they've done with the strength training, haven't they?
Yeah, it would just be interesting. Zydrunas Savickas, who's pretty much like the strongest human being that ever lived. I think it would be fair to say that he's the greatest strongman of all time.
Who was it?
Zydrunas.
Oh, is it
Savickas?
Yeah,
Big Z.
I know him. Yeah.
Yeah, or Big Z.
Where was he from? Poland, wasn't he?
Lithuania.
Lithuania. Yeah. Okay.
I think it's Lithuania. Well, I hope so.
Big Z.
Just an absolute like animal of an individual.
Oh, that's him there, isn't it? Yeah.
And like one of the greatest vertical presses to have ever lived. That would be pretty cool. Yeah. His overhead press records are pretty gnarly. Yeah. And who else? I've got one more person, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think you've had 8, but go.
Oh, really?
You get one more.
Oh, I
want a wrestler.
Yeah, because I think it'd have to be a pro wrestler.
Yeah,
right?
you have
to. Kenny Omega or Mark Henry, one of those.
Yeah, well, Mark Henry's kind of a strong man. So
so like Mark Henry, because he's one of the strongest human beings to have ever lived. If you've never watched Mark Henry at the Arnold's, It's a fucking insane video.
Oh yeah.
His axle press that he does is just insane.
And that's overhead, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you actually check how big the axle is that he's holding and pressing, it's just fucking, it's ridiculous.
Couldn't get my hands around it.
And he did it for reps. He was the only individual that, from my memory serves correct, he was the only individual to do it for reps. There was someone else was able to do it at least once, but he was able to do it for reps.
Yeah, he's a big man.
I think Kenny Omega is just if you like pro wrestling, then Kenny Omega is like the greatest, one of the greatest pro wrestlers to have ever lived.
Where is he?
Cool. That's him. That's he's just doing his thing, getting up off the floor.
Was he AEW now, Kenny Omega?
Yeah, he was one of the founders of.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
Where did he start?
He's Canadian,
Okay.
but he really made his big impact in Japan.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah,
and I guess before that was awesome. I was going to say, like, that's a lot of anyone who's kind of wanting to get a deeper dive into strength training. There's a lot there that they can kind of look into.
Yeah.
But did you want to, before we finish up, did you want to kind of wrap up, or you have anything else to say to them before you kind of we finish up here?
I think if there are any coaches and trainers and stuff watching, then I think you should really make use of how many great sports scientists and coaches are out there just posting free information. And then, you follow one and you'll learn about many others. And that's how I kind of operate. I often if I follow a trainer or a coach or whoever it may be, I'll go through their follower list and be like, oh, who's here that I haven't seen before, and who can I get more information from?
Yeah.
And then also look outside of the sports that you deal in, and you'll just gain extra information and you'll learn things that you didn't know. And knowledge is never a bad thing to have.
Nah, awesome. It's been an unreal chat, and you're definitely a student of the strength game business.
Just a nerd.
Strength nerd.
I think we all are, right?
And then, as always, the people who watch the show always ask this at the end of the podcast. So who do you think, shout out to the all the Smoke Boys where I stole this idea from, just a podcast with two basketball players. And so who do you think would be good for the podcast? But the thing is, you have to try get them on for us. Yeah.
Okay. So I prepared for this because I knew what I was in for. I've watched obviously I've watched the podcast before, so I knew what was going on. The individual that I've chosen that I think would be interested is a physiotherapist and strength and conditioning coach by the name of Matt Ho.
Matt Ho.
So if you're on Instagram, he's the _no_gi_physio.
I was about to write underscore then.
No gi is just one word. Yep. _physio.
People are going to get a look at my spelling.
So he runs a clinic called Physio Life. But just a phenomenal dude. Lots of information. Once again, another guy on Instagram that's posting a lot of free information out there. And another good thing about him is that he's someone that cites a lot of the stuff that he's posting.
Yeah, okay.
So if he's gained that knowledge from another sports scientist or whoever it may be, he'll link them in there. So you expand your understanding of things.
No, that's great.
So
is this him? Do you know? Is this
that's his
business?
His company? But yeah, he has an Instagram. You can check him out on Instagram. He looks like Dean Cain.
That's not it.
That's Physio. Yeah, but if you search on Instagram, go to your Explore.
Oh, yep, here we go.
I can teach you how to use Instagram.
No, who uses? There's only no one in the world uses Instagram on their laptop.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I'll take that.
So the _no gi _physio. Here we are. Oh.
There you go.
There
Matt
it is. Boom.
So I think Matt has a lot of interesting information to post up. I've had the pleasure of getting my ass kicked by Matt as well on the Jiu Jitsu mat. So he's an incredibly strong individual as well. But has a lot of sporting background in footy and I think boxing and Jiu Jitsu and all sorts of stuff. But lots of really interesting information. Dude is really quick to help and share
Yeah,
all
that's
of that
good.
information.
Yeah.
He's helped a lot of athletes over at Absolute MMA and outside of Absolute MMA as well. A lot of individuals that I've coached as well have gone to him for physio help and rehab help.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's killer.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, or Amit. I'll reach out. But yeah, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Episode 13, one of the best, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Awesome.
Cheers.